Good morning. All week we have been together Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and today Friday, walking with Jesus in this Passion Week. My name is Steve. I'm the pastor of Sisters Community Church. This is my friend Cindy, and we've been having a dialogue over the last few days about these last thoughts, last words of Jesus as he's interacted with his disciples and brought them into the upper room, washing their feet, being betrayed, recognizing that he's on his way to the cross. As he went from the foot washing into the garden, and that is found in John 18, he's there with his disciples in the garden and a whole cohort of Roman soldiers led by Judas, who had betrayed him. It is said that there were 500-600 people there at that time coming out to arrest Jesus. In a way, Jesus finds that a little comical because he was around them all the time and they could have grabbed him and he wouldn't have put up a fuss, but now they feel somehow they need 600 people, and they ask him, are you Jesus? And he says, I am he. And the scripture says they all fell backwards as he communicates the ego ame, which is that Hebrew Greek phrase that represents the very thing that Moses heard when God told him to tell Pharaoh, I am that I am. But as Jesus is there, he gets arrested. Peter's still fighting to try to protect him, takes off the high priest's ear. They ultimately take Jesus before Pilate, and Pilate enters into a conversation with him, Pilate being very political, being very superstitious, being very concerned about this Jesus. He didn't really want to give Jesus up, but he was more concerned about the position of honor he had and the fact that he was ruling in that particular time, and the Jews had convinced him that Jesus was trying to overthrow Rome by making himself to be like Caesar. And if it was heard that Pilate did nothing about it, Pilate would have been in trouble. And yet, Cindy, you were mentioning how Pilate was a little bit superstitious and there was that dream. And what do you think Pilate was feeling in the midst of all of that?
Well, I think he was intrigued and afraid. I think he was a little afraid of Jesus, because what if Jesus really was the Son of God? What if he really wasn't just a man?
Yeah.
What if his wife's dream was true?
Yeah.
That, I think he was afraid of that, but it wasn't a spiritual fear.
Yeah.
It was just a human fear. He wasn't changed by that.
Right.
He was more afraid of ultimately what the Jewish leaders were barking at him about.
Right. And a good example of, while there was some fear, he loved his life more than he hated the fear.
And he loved his position as well, and he didn't want to lose his position.
Yeah. And yet he asked the question, are you king of the Jews? He didn't really want to, as we read, he didn't really want to offer up Jesus up. But Jesus, are you telling me that, Pilate? Or did you get that on your own? Did somebody tell that to you? And so what we find out is that Peter or Pilate really didn't want to do this, but when he communicated that to the Jewish crowd, all he heard was, no, we don't want you to release him. Not him. Yeah. Give us Barabbas. Right. And you had mentioned something earlier about Barabbas, which I thought was very interesting in terms of his name.
His name was Jesus Barabbas, which meant son of the Father.
Yeah.
So he was named son of the Father, but here Jesus Christ is the actual
son of the Father.
The son of the Father.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I was saying that Barabbas was really the first individual who got to experience the freedom that came as a result of Jesus going to the cross. And so this all happens in John 18, and then Pilate finally takes Jesus and he has him flogged. And then Jesus goes to the cross, and And it says that Pilate in verse 8 of 19, Pilate heard this in terms of why Jesus should die. He was afraid of, again, losing his position more than he was about what he was doing to Jesus. So he just went back inside the palace and asked Jesus, where do you come from? And Jesus gave him no answer. He said, do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said, do you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? And this must have been the most crushing thing that Jesus said. You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above.
That's right.
Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. He's saying, Pilate, all your authority comes from heaven. You are only doing what you're being allowed to do because there's something greater than you, and for that matter, me and everything else that's going on that's at stake here. It is the salvation of the humanity that I have come for.
Yeah, and then it says from that point on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be king opposes Caesar.
There's a little bit of that for all of us in that how often do we allow our peers to determine how radical we're going to be in our faith?
Right.
How we're sometimes concerned about losing friends.
Absolutely.
I remember when I came to faith initially as a hippie living in the commune, all of my hippie friends would mock me and they would make fun of us. Oh, you're a Jesus freak now. And there was a time when I had to make a decision whether I was going to follow Jesus and leave that commune, or I was going to allow my need for people to like me to consume. And it was time to walk away from my friends. So.
And that's a hard thing to do. And certainly Pilate wasn't going to do what he knew was right.
Right. Pilate was more concerned about the position and the power that it gave him than it was about the person of Jesus. And then finally we come to this crucifixion of Jesus, and there's so much that goes on here. But one of the things we'd like to just kind of highlight is how even in this moment, Jesus' love for those people around him, John and Mary, seems so powerful in that time, and even John's response to Jesus. What did you see there?
Oh man, he's hanging on the cross. I mean, not to go into any of the gruesome detail of the flogging and of the agony he must have gone through being hung on the cross with the nails and all of that, and then bearing the sin of the world. Could you imagine?
No.
Could you imagine even being able to focus on the people that you love that are at the foot of the cross? So they're standing, nearby. It says that near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom Jesus loved, which isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
That's John.
Yeah, John, the best friend. Yeah,
Standing
I love that.
nearby. John didn't flee. Where were the other disciples? They were probably all terrified and hiding.
Yeah.
But the loyalty of John to Jesus, he was there. And he said to his mother, this is Jesus saying to his mother, dear woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, John, here is your mother. From that time on, the disciple took her into his home.
Yeah.
So here's Jesus. He's bore the sin of mankind for all eternity. He's been beaten, he's in pain, he's dying, and yet he cares so much to point to his mother, who must have been in terrible agony.
Yeah, there's something beautiful about that. In the hours of his greatest challenge, he's demonstrating his greatest love as an expression. And
for his own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, for us is what are tangible ways in this pandemic or in other times of trial, what are tangible ways that we can show compassion and care for people who are going through difficult times? You mentioned yesterday that in the beginning he was troubled in his spirit, that all through this time, and he wasn't troubled in his spirit for himself.
No.
He was the one that was going to go to the cross to be spit upon, to be beaten, to be thrashed, to have people mock him and punch him. And yet in that, his concern, even as you just read, was for John, was for Mary, for his disciples. And that compassion, seemed to be something. It's almost like he set aside his own troubles. He said his only concern was glorifying the Father. And that glorifying of the Father was the very expression of the cross. Because the Roman world saw the cross as an instrument of cruelty that would demonstrate intimidation and power and might makes right. And Jesus says, no, that's the place that glory is going to be revealed. And that glory was Jesus saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's the clash of two worlds, right? The world of power and might, the world of meekness and mercy. It is why Paul would say the cross is foolishness to those that are perishing. Yeah. But here we see Jesus use this instrument of cruelty to give life to people, to give forgiveness to people, to demonstrate this powerful love towards John and his mother, even as he's hanging there in agony and pain. It's mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. It's beautiful. Jesus suffered more than any human being could ever suffer.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
All of that because of his love for each and every person.
Yeah. It's really hard to get your arms around that kind of love or that kind of Savior, and yet we know it's true. Mm-hmm. That love has impacted our lives. And as Jesus goes to the cross and he hangs there demonstrating it, I love maybe the last words of this chapter 19, where he says, it is finished. And so the very reason for which Jesus came, that we learned about all the way back in John chapter 2 at the wedding of Cana, he said, my hour has not yet come, his hour has come. Yes. And what was that hour? It was the hour where he would defeat all darkness. Mm-hmm. He would overcome all pain, all sickness, all disease. In a few days, the tomb would be empty, and it would provide us with a hope that is beyond anything that we could see or touch or taste or feel or think. When I think about this, and I think about the interaction here, and I even think about John's loyalty to Jesus and Jesus' loyalty to John, we get back to that friendship, that love, that concern. And maybe on this day, we would ask ourselves the question, how do we become a friend of Jesus? And oftentimes I've said, it's not enough to be the friend of Jesus. What about being a friend to our neighbor? You see, because Christianity isn't simply about pressing into the heart of God, though it is that, and certainly we want to do that as a priority. But as much as we press into the heart of God, we need to press into the heart of our neighbor. Jesus summed it up. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. I don't think we've ever seen such powerful love as we see it here in these last moments where Jesus totally gives of himself so that we might become a people that would live in relationship with him, free from selfishness, free from the opinions of others, free from using our resources for ourselves, free from the concerns we might have as if Jesus and what he did wouldn't be enough to live our life. As you celebrate this Friday that we call Good Friday, in many ways it's a dark Friday, but we look back and we say it's good because we know that if Jesus had not gone to the cross and paid the price to deliver Adam from all of his lostness and sinfulness and self-centeredness, we would still be men and women most miserable. But because of the resurrection, because of the death, burial, and the resurrection, we celebrate this week. And we come to this Sunday in a couple of days and celebrate the hope that is ours because we serve a God who's not dead. Even as the angel said to Mary, why do you seek him? For he is not here, he is risen. I pray you have a great Easter and a great day with your loved ones. God bless you.
So fill me, Lord, please fill me. So